Good morning, everyone. I'm Jason Greenberg Mohamedi. I am from Education Northwest, and we are delighted to host today's presentation, today's convening. So welcome to REL Northwest's virtual convening on Grow Your Own Teacher Programs, Diversifying the Teacher Workforce. We have 5 really outstanding presenters today sharing their knowledge of research and policy on Grow Your Own programs and featuring an example of the Thrive and Grow Your Own program in Washington State. So the goal of our convening today is to increase collaboration and knowledge among educators, community members, and policymakers who are developing Grow Your Own programs to promote equitable access to diverse teachers. So we're going to start today with what the research says about Grow Your Own Teacher programs and efforts to diversify the teacher workforce, and then break out into small discussion groups. After that, we will reconvene and learn about a Grow Your Own partnership between Highline Public Schools and Western Washington University, and the policy environment in Washington that makes it possible. And again, followed by discussion groups. Today's convening is sponsored by the Department of Education's Institute for Education Science, Regional Education Lab Northwest. That's a handful of words, but basically the Regional Education Lab Northwest, or REL Northwest, is hosted or is located in Education Northwest here in Portland, Oregon. And we've been the Regional Education Lab for the Northwest region for more than 50 years. And our purpose is really to support educators, policymakers, community members to use data and research to make informed and equitable decisions that improve outcomes for all students. REL Northwest has been engaged in Grow Your Own and teacher pathway work in all 5 of our Northwest states. So that's including Alaska. And publishing original research and research summaries. I'm going to paste a few of these into the chat so that you can see an example of our work. And with all of that, I'm going to then hand this over to Ashley. So thank you all. And again, welcome.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear from these great presenters. So we have a few that are lined up today, and I can just kind of go over a little bit of an introduction for you. So first we have Dr. Conra Gist. She's an associate professor of teaching and teacher education in the College of Education at the University of Houston. Her research explores programs, policies, and practices that support the academic and professional advancement of teachers of color, with a specific concentration in Grow Your Own community-centered teacher development. She has a series of publications that support this work, and currently she is serving as a lead co-editor for the Handbook of Research on Teachers of Color, a scholarship project dedicated to charting the landscape of research on teacher diversity across 11 domains of inquiry, including recruitment, preparation, mentorship, retention, professional development, human resources, and induction, educational impact, policy, minority serving institutions, pedagogical and leadership practices, and intersectionality. Quite the handful. So she received her doctorate in urban education at the City University of New York Graduate Center. In this first research section, we also have Amaya Garcia. She is the Deputy Director for English Learner Education with the Education Policy Program at the New America Foundation. She provides research and analysis on policies and programs related to dual language education, bilingual teacher preparation and Grow Your Own teacher pathways, bilingual education, English language proficiency, and early education. Prior to joining New America, Amaya was policy analyst at the DC State Board of Education and a research associate at the American Institutes for Research. Previously, she worked on a variety of research labs conducting studies on topics including school finance, reading comprehension, infant learning and memory, early language development. And she holds a master's degree in public policy from the University of Maryland, College Park, a master's degree in cognitive studies in education from Teachers College, Columbia University, and a bachelor's degree in English and psychology from the University of Iowa. So those are our first two presenters, and we'll go ahead and get started with those. And Conrad, you are going to be the first presenter on this section.
Okay, thank you for that warm introduction, Ashley. And I have to give a special thank you to Jason for inviting me to come and share this work. It's always an honor to be able to, for someone to ask you to talk about your work. And so I'm just really happy to be here and happy that there's just such an interest in advancing Grow Your Own work, especially as it relates to educator diversity. And so what I have prepared to share today is really just a little bit of an overview in terms of talking about research and grow your own programs. And it really focuses on two articles that I developed, one in collaboration with Dr. Margarita Bianco and Dr. Marvin Lin, which is a Journal of Teacher Education article that looks at a review of literature on grow your own programs. And then the second is really kind of looking at a teacher education quarterly article that I developed for a special issue, which asks questions around the different kinds of projects that are growing, or that are kind of driving grow your own programs. And so that's going to shape pretty much what I talk about for the next few minutes. So the first thing that I want to do is just to kind of contextualize grow your own teacher pools. And so if you could advance to the next slide, please. Looks like maybe you skipped a slide there. Did we skip a slide? Okay, well, let me just give a little bit of anchoring. So in terms of thinking about grow your own teacher pools, the first thing is that we're really kind of thinking about them as it relates to paraprofessional pool, high school and middle school pool, community leader pool, a gender specific pool, thinking very specifically about how do we use grow your own programs to increase the number of males in the profession, for example, and then using grow your own programs also as a way to support career changes into the profession. And so that's kind of the focus in terms of the key recruitment pool. And I would also say that as it relates to my work, there's a very intentional focus on teachers of color and Indigenous teachers and thinking about local community teachers. And so with that context, the conceptual framing of grow your own programs for teachers of color, we really sort of looked at it in this article as a continuum of support, right? So not necessarily just thinking about it as it relates to recruitment, but also thinking about preparation in terms of the kind of curriculum, pedagogy, and structures that are necessary in order to support candidates learn in ways that are effective, and then also thinking about it as it relates to retention. And so we kind of define that in this article as mechanisms such as professional development and mentorship that support teachers to actually remain in the profession. Next slide, please. And then we also intentionally grounded grow your own programs as rooted in grassroots racial injustice movements or initiatives that are committed to the academic and professional development of local community teachers of color. And so we explicitly name this in our work. And I think that's important because we don't make the assumption that all grow your own programs will have that type of commitment, but that is the commitment of our work and sort of how we're thinking about positioning and framing grow your own programs. The next slide. And then we also come from the position that teachers of color possess a form of community cultural wealth that imbues them with an array of knowledge, skills, and abilities to effectively teach Brown and Black youth. And so we kind of say that at the outset in terms of thinking about teachers of color and Indigenous teachers that we're recruiting for our programs, that we really sort of see it from a strength-based asset perspective around this work. And so I think that that's really important in terms of the initial framing, right? These commitments to justice, really sort of seeing teachers of color from the community cultural wealth lens and thinking about grow your own programs from an integrated perspective, not just thinking about it as a recruitment, but thinking about what our responsibilities are as it relates to preparation, and then also equally important, what our responsibilities are as it relates to retention. And so the next slide, kind of asks an important question that I think will become more relevant as grow your own programs become more popular. I get invited to do these talks much more frequently than the past couple of years. And what that signals to me is that there's an increasing interest in this type of program. Obviously, our president has kind of laid out an agenda to look to fund more grow your own programs. But what I think is important before we kind of run to the conclusion that grow your own programs are the solution for everything thinking is that we really sort of think about what are the projects that are actually driving Grow Your Own programs. And so this is the article that I developed in the Teacher Ed Quarterly, where I just really asked this question of what projects are driving Grow Your Own program development. And so I kind of talk about it as either an economic project, a workforce development project, an educator preparation project, or a justice project. And obviously these things can kind of all work in tandem, right? But I think it's really important that whenever we think about a rush to develop Grow Your Own programs, that we ask people what is kind of their primary project that they're concerned about. And so the next slide talks about this idea of the economic project. And I frame it as an economic project because these are folks that are kind of primarily concerned about teacher shortages. We have these shortages that are happening. We need to kind of fill seats quickly, right? Or they're concerned about teacher attrition. We have people who are leaving the profession at a fast clip, and we just need to make sure that we fix this problem, right? And in some ways, I would say that the development of alternative certification programs really initially, without a kind of critical race perspective or thinking about recruiting locally, was really about this economic project. And so in some sense, I think that Grow Your Own programs, some of their development can be characterized as a type of economic project. The next kind of project is thinking about it in the context of a type of, if you advance to the next slide, please, a workforce development project. And so from the workforce development project, we're thinking about this from an HR school district lens, where sort of there are these kind of issues in terms of making sure that we have racial parity between students and teachers. And so sort of HR folks are really concerned about how can we increase the number of folks of color and Indigenous people, right? And so we're thinking about how to bring them into the work. And so as a workforce development project, there's a commitment to thinking about developing Grow Your Own programs just to address that need. The next type of project, if you could advance to the next slide, is also thinking about it as an educator preparation project. I think that it is no secret that traditional educator preparation programs have been primarily white, middle class, and female, right? And so people are looking at Grow Your Own programs as a way to begin to rectify this problem in some sense. And so some people have been looking to Grow Your Own programs as a way to kind of develop or fix traditional teacher education programs. But what I really argue is thinking about the next slide, thinking about Grow Your Own programs as a type of justice project, and really looking at them as an opportunity to develop equitable educational opportunities for all students by putting teachers in the classroom who are really committed to the community, who are going to be more likely to be retained. I also look at it as a justice project because I think it's about developing anti-racist structures in terms of how we develop our programs to be committed for folks who are considered non-traditional, right? What does it mean to develop structures that really allow them not only to enter the program, but to be able to successfully complete the program? And then, as I mentioned before, in terms of our overarching of kind of our framework around commitment to Grow Your Own programs, is this notion of really being committed to the community cultural capital and community cultural wealth of the community. And so I kind of open this up as a way to think about the different kind of projects that are framing Grow Your Own programs. And that for me, in talking about this work, it's really a justice project that then goes to serve the other three projects that I mentioned. So the second part that I want to kind of go through briefly, if you advance to the next slide, is really sort of talking a little bit about the research from our review of literature on Grow Your Own programs that looks at what do we found out as it related to recruitment, preparation, and retention. So if you advance to the next slide, what we found as it related to recruitment, we really sort of looked at it in two different lenses. We were thinking about what do we know as it relates to community and school teacher pipelines, and what do we know as it relates to middle and high school teacher pipelines. And one of the things that we saw in the recruitment end is that from the community and school teacher pipelines, there really was this commitment to this idea of seeing the potential of local community teachers, valuing their funds of knowledge and community cultural wealth. And there also was some promise if we use targeted academic, social, and financial supports, that folks would actually, gain entry into the profession that wouldn't typically have access. On the flip side, whenever we were looking at middle and high school pipeline programs, one of the things that we were noticing in the research literature is there was a lot of types of programs that were developing teacher clubs or kind of intro to teaching courses, things of that nature, but not as much of a commitment to thinking about the community cultural wealth or valuing the funds of knowledge of folks of color and Indigenous people. And so this was kind of a clear distinction in terms of thinking about Grow Your Own programs. What were we seeing in the research literature as it related to community and school pipelines, and what were we seeing as it was related to middle and high school pipelines? Then the next part of the work was thinking about what did the research literature say as it related to preparation? So if you advance to the next slide, for preparation, one of the things that we were seeing is that, again, for the community and school teacher pipelines, there was this kind of intention to kind of marry the funds of knowledge and community cultural wealth with the preparation experiences of folks who were coming through the Grow Your Own programs. However, one of the concerning trends within that research literature is that there was a high level of attrition in terms of some of the folks who were going through the Grow Your Own programs, right? Because they were experiencing financial barriers, difficulty with certification exams. And in some instances, there was a kind of rigid or inflexible program design that made it difficult for them to complete. And one of the things that we highlighted is the range of time from completing a program, anywhere from 2 to 8 to 10 years sometimes, right? And so when you think about the kind of economic project that often drives Grow Your Own programs, that can become deeply problematic, right? In terms of thinking about how long it takes people to actually enter and complete the program. And then on the flip side, in terms of the preparation for middle and high school teacher pipelines, there wasn't nearly as much information on the preparation end, right? A lot of it, was connected to just like getting them interested in the program itself, but not necessarily preparing them to take up some of the grassroots and racial justice work that some of the other preparation programs were doing and that were dedicated to community and teacher pipelines. And so one of the things that we found in the research literature there was that there really were few programs that had a critical education perspective. And then the last part was thinking about in the literature, the next slide, please, was really related to retention. And I think that this is a really important point as it relates to the work, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to know, are Grow Your Own teachers actually remaining in the profession? And really, there's kind of limited evidence there in terms of what we were actually able to find, right? We found that there was some evidence that some of these Grow Your Own programs are able to retain their candidates, but really it's scant evidence. We don't know nearly enough about that. And for the folks who actually remained, it seemed as if they were remaining in spite of despite having like any, supports to really keep them there once they were actually placed in schools. And so what that lets us know is that like they're able to draw upon their community cultural wealth to remain in the profession. They don't always necessarily have the kind of program structure supports during induction to really kind of allow them to deepen their pedagogical practice over time. And then on the middle school and high school pipeline side, we really didn't see a lot of evidence that kind of attached what people were doing in middle school and high school programs and what was actually happening in terms of placement in classrooms as teachers. It seems that once folks actually left their middle and high school programs and went into the teacher preparation program, the data trail stopped oftentimes. And so we sort of saw that as an area where there needs to be extensive research as it relates to retention. And so I know that I'm short on time. So let's see if you could advance. Let's see, I'm trying to see, advance the next slide there. And advance again. And advance again. And so I'll leave with this kind of last thought here, because I think that this is thinking about Grow Your Own programs in terms of 5 educator preparation program best practices, so to speak. And so I think what the research would say is that we need to interrogate and commit to addressing race and racism from an intersectional lens in relation to teacher education faculty and teacher candidates, program design and curriculum, and program and college leadership. That really we have to have these kind of commitments in our work if we want to bring in folks that haven't traditionally had access to the program. The other thing that we would argue, I think that the research would say, is that we have to incentivize, really kind of fund and develop a Grow Your Own program development that's committed to historically marginalized communities and people of color. Right? And then also that we really need a research and outcome documentation from Grow Your Own programs at each stage of the teacher development continuum. One of the reasons that we talked about the research as it related to recruitment, preparation, and retention is we really wanted to clarify what we know and don't know across these 3 different areas. And then we also talk about the importance of valuing and funding local community school research on non-traditional and historically marginalized populations involving non-traditional methodologies. So how do we use research methodologies that really center and uplift the voices of communities of color and Indigenous communities in ways that really sort of allow their voices to drive the development of Grow Your Own programs? And then finally, and I think this is starting to take place, and I think my colleague Amaya will begin to talk to this in terms of her work, to orchestrate a GYO task force in collaboration and partnership with key stakeholders in local schools, community organizations, community colleges, career and technical education, and educator preparation programs that really kind of brings all stakeholders together to begin to take up this work in a systematic way. So I think that that is all that I have time for in terms of framing, but I'm happy to entertain questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conrad. I really appreciate that. I think it provides a really good foundation for understanding grow your own programming and the different kind of ways to approach it. I really do appreciate you setting that framework in place. And just a little housekeeping. So Conrad's provided her email address here if you have any direct questions for her. If you have further questions that are kind of popping up as we're talking through this, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be doing breakout sessions again after the next presentation. So if you want to bring any of those questions up during the breakout sessions or kind of have that help to spawn the next round of conversation, we're happy to do that. We have a large group, so we're not doing any kind of formal question and answer time during the presentations, but we'll use the breakout sessions to do that. So thank you so much. Now we are on to Amaya's presentation. And again, these items will also the PowerPoint used for today, as well as the recording, will be available after. And so if you want to look at any of the resources that Conrad has provided the references to, we'll have that available afterward for you to look through. All right, thank you. And on to Amaya.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Conrad. I appreciate you, and I'm happy to have you as one of my professional colleagues in this work. I'm going to build a little bit on what Conrad talked about and take a look at what we know about the state of GYO across the country. So you can go to the next slide, please. But first, I want to kind of talk about how we define GYO, because GYO is a very localized strategy, which means it often has a very localized definition. But when my colleagues and I at U America embarked on this work focused on GYO, we wanted to make sure that we had a common definition that we could share when we were thinking about it. And so we really define GYO as partnerships between educator preparation programs, school districts, community organizations that recruit and prepare local community members, so like high school students, paraeducators, parents, to enter the teaching profession and teach in their communities. So for us, the core definite parts of GYO are really that partnership component and that component of recruiting teachers from the community for the community. Next slide. And so, as Conrad mentioned, GYO has garnered a lot of national attention as a strategy for strengthening and diversifying the teacher workforce. And actually, with the shift to the new presidential administration and new Democratic majorities in the House and Senate, we've seen a flurry of legislative proposals related to GYO that are in progress. Some things like extending amendments to Title II of the Higher Education Act to standalone bills to boost recruitment and preparation of teachers. And just last week, President Biden included over $2 billion for GYO programs and paid year-long teacher residency programs in his plan for families. But actually, even before all these changes, we saw an increase in GYO programs at the state and local level and in state competitive grants designed to bolster GYO. So given these trends, we sought to conduct a 50-state scan to better understand what was happening. And we started this scan in the summer of 2018, and I actually just updated the data yesterday to reflect some new programs that have come on the scene. As part of the scan, we examined programs that target high school students, paraeducators, non-certified school staff, and community members. The analysis was limited to programs that were geared toward local candidates who would be teaching in their communities. So I did not look at any programs that were designed like specifically for career changers or things that are maybe not totally geared to recruiting people who are already within schools. To be as comprehensive as possible, we captured a broad range of programs that include career and technical education programs, alternative certification, career ladders, and those that are more limited in scope, such as scholarships and student clubs. We also partnered with FDR Group to survey state Title II, which focused on teacher recruitment and preparation, and Title III, which focused on English learners under the Every Student Achieves, the ESSA Act, to learn about their efforts to recruit and prepare educators through GYO and other efforts to prepare bilingual educators specifically. The findings of the survey were used to supplement and confirm the information that we conducted in our independent review of policies and programs. Next slide. So we came away with 5 primary findings, and I'll just go through them one by one. So not surprisingly, we found that localities use the term GYO in different ways to address common problems. So some states actually don't define the term at all. They might have a program, they might have an initiative, but they never actually say what they mean. So for example, Missouri's has a guidance resource on GYO and describes GYO as a strategy to help districts grow their own teacher pipeline by attracting and supporting students in their home districts to become future teachers. Minnesota frames GYO in terms of the program's stated goal, which is to diversify the state's educator workforce. And Hawaii's definition leans a little bit more towards intended targets of GYO, noting that the scholarship funding is for specific individuals in the system. Overall, we found that GYO is being leveraged as a strategy for solving teacher shortages and increasing the diversity of the teacher work pipeline. That is a universal finding, and that applies to all programs, you know, that we are looking at. Getting into like a little bit of the bigger details, most states have at least one GYO program, but tremendous variety exists in design and strategy. So actually, there's only 3 states that don't have any kind of GYO program. So that means 47 states and DC. We found programs for high school students, paras, community members, etc. The number of program types offered varied widely. So there's 7 states that only have kind of one program and 9 states that had more than 5 program types. So these program types could, like I said, they could be career technical education, they could be scholarships, they could be state competitive grants, they could be a district run program. There really is a wide variety of what you see. The number of programs initiated at the district level far outnumbers those that are supported by state investments. So the highly local nature of GYO is what makes them effective, but it also means that there's substantial variation across program design, reliance on partnerships, and the amount and types of supports offered to candidates, and the funding that can support the programs. They also vary in terms of the pathways. So some programs have, so Minnesota has a state grant that has 2 pathways, one for paras, one for high school students. Texas has 3 pathways. So they add, in addition to high school students and paras, they actually have one for current teacher candidates to give them a year-long clinical teaching assignment. And then other states like California, Maryland, Nevada, they have scholarships, but don't really have a comprehensive program that would like include the wraparound support something we might want to see. In terms of state policy, more than half of states have a policy, so GY 28 states. So we define a policy as a statute, bill, or executive order. Again, they vary from scholarships to alternative routes. And in spite of having GYO policies on the books, only 20 states actually fund some type of GYO program, and 9 states run competitive grant programs to fund GYO, the grand majority of which seek to help diversify the teacher workforce. And I can say that when I started looking at GYO a couple of years ago, there was only 4 state competitive grant programs, and now we have 9. So we have seen a substantial increase in that. And then kind of building on what Connor's talking about in terms of like the recruitment frames and who's being pulled into these programs, pathways for high school students are the most common type of GYO. 47 states and DC have at least one type of program to expose high school students to careers in education. A lot of them are offered through the career and technical education. And then there's a handful of, like many states also do dual enrollment, which allows kids to take college credit courses while still in high school. We also see some momentum going towards apprenticeship models and how to create apprenticeships that will help high school students become teachers as well. High school students are an attractive pool of potential teachers because they think they'll be more invested in returning to teach in their home communities. Some studies suggest that early recruitment of middle and high school students are more effective than pulling from adult populations, but we know that there are big gaps in what we know about the efficacy of these programs. There's basically no data on whether or not they actually produce teachers. Paraeducator pathways are another widely available one. That's 35 states. There's at least one kind of paraeducator program. Many times these paras are tapped by their building administrator due to their instructional expertise, knowledge of the district, and interest in becoming a teacher. In addition, we know that paraeducators are more likely to match the racial and linguistic diversity of the K-12 population. Unfortunately, the reach of these programs remains limited because they're often specific to a school district, and it's unclear how many paraeducators are served in each program. In terms of the kinds of programs, scholarship programs likely have a wider reach and maybe a more efficient strategy for producing teacher, but we need more research to examine the different outcomes on the different types of GYO. Next slide. So, based on kind of all the research that exists on GYO and this growing interest in what was happening, we thought it was important to actually try to outline what essential policies and practices are for having a high quality GYO program. And so we actually built these policies and practices with the help of a GYO advisory committee, some of whom the members are here today. And these are really designed to make sure that states have a resource or somewhere to start when they're actually trying to plan for these programs. So we know that allocated funding to develop and sustain programs is important. We don't want districts just have to cobble and find grants from philanthropy to get these programs off the ground. We need state investments and we need federal investments. We need data systems to track program recruitment, completion, job placement, and retention. We need program evaluation to gauge impact on local workforce needs. So any policy needs to have that embedded because we want to actually build on what Conrad was talking about when it came to not really knowing what the long-term outcomes are on retention or even student achievement. We need teacher and certification systems that offer multiple approaches to measuring educator skills and competencies, and we need greater accessibility for candidates with and without bachelor's degrees. Next slide. So, and then when you think about like the programmatic level, these recommendations are designed to really address and remove some of the barriers and to actually make it so that we don't have people who have to spend 8 years trying to get a degree, as Conrad was talking about. So we know that strong collaboration and coordination across school districts, educator prep providers, and community organizations is really important because they work together and collaborate, which we'll hear more about actually in the next presentation, because they're a great example of how those partnerships can work. Recruitment of linguistically and culturally diverse candidates who are reflective of and responsive to the needs of the community. Wraparound supports are probably the biggest key, and that's what you see through all the research that's been done on GYO. Paid work-based experience under the guidance of a mentor teacher. We really want these individuals to be paid because otherwise there's a lot of more financial barriers that they have to face in earning a degree. And we need structured pathways for candidates to advance toward required teaching credentials and certification with, at various stages. So that's based on the fact that we did focus groups with paraeducators, and many of them had no idea like what opportunities were available to them in their state or their district to become a teacher. Next slide, and I'll go really quick because I'm basically out of time. So we launched the Grow Your Own National Network earlier this year. That's going to serve these three primary purposes. Basically, we want to build a learning community where we have a set of programs that can connect, share resources, best practices, and strategies to address challenges, to try to break down some of those silos that exist because most programs kind of run on their own and don't always have times to connect with others. We want to strengthen the local capacity of programs by providing them with targeted resources for program and policy development. And we want to strengthen the evidence base on GYO programs by collecting data and sharing stories from the field. We launched the network in January, and we have actually 14 programs in 11 states now because we just added a program recently. And I think that is it. I know I'm up for time, and I think that's my last slide.
Thank you so much, Amaya. I really appreciate that. I think that it's an exciting opportunity to kind of view what's out there and see what the landscape looks like nationally. And I really appreciate that. I know that a lot of the people on the call are really interested to kind of hear more about those things. So this next section is a time to go out into our breakout rooms and talk about what we've heard. So we've gone ahead and assigned breakout rooms for everyone on the call that are based on the role that you've identified when you signed up for the convening. We're going to go in for about 15 minutes. We're going to come out, aim for around 10:50. If you proceed to the next slide, we have a series of discussion questions that can help you guide your discussion if you'd like. Just how has your the research reflected your experience in teacher recruitment, preparation, or retention, especially when we look at Grow Your Own programs? Did anything about the research surprise you? And what do you still need to know to build Grow Your Own work in your own practice? So first, as we go into that, please provide a small introduction, include your name, your affiliation, and how your work relates to Grow Your Own programs. And then we can dive into those discussion questions, okay? And I believe that Jenny will copy and paste those into the chat, and we're good to go. Thank you, Jenny. All right, thank you, everyone. If you didn't have time to complete your conversation, as I'm sure many of the rooms feel, then we have another discussion group at the end of this next session that you'll have the time to join back into, and it'll be the same group again. So you can just hit the ground running with your discussion after this section. So thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this next section, we're going to hear a little bit about highlighting a successful Grow Your Own partnership. We have representatives from Highline Public Schools, Western Washington University, as well as the Washington Professional Educator Standards Board. So just a quick overview of our speakers. So first we have Alexandra Manuel, who serves as the executive director for Washington Professional Educator Standards Board. Her experience includes resource development, government relations, community engagement, policy development, systems change, capacity building, and immigrant integration. Alex is focused on providing greater access to the educator workforce by lifting up community assets, including language and culture. Alex brings skills as a strategic leader in systems integration and strategic planning, community engagement, and change management from her employment and consulting experience in both private and public organizations, including Highline College, Seattle University, City of Auburn, YMCA, City of Seattle, and University of Washington. Alex has earned her bachelor's degree at George Mason University in organizational development and social change, and her master's degree in education from Seattle University. We also have Bernard Coots, who is the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Leadership at Highline Public Schools. Bernard supports and supervises teams that support language learning in PK through 12 and secondary instruction. He supports the integration and responsiveness of these teams to meet student needs, collaborate with schools, and develop authentic relationships with families. Bernard also coordinates system-wide equity-related education and professional development. He began his teaching career at Evergreen High School and holds degrees from Seattle University and Boston College. And finally, in this section, we have Dr. Marcia Riddle-Booley, who's a professor and the Director of Bilingual Teacher Community Roots at Western Washington University. Marcia is the Teacher Education Director for the Future Bilingual Teachers Fellows program, which is an alternative route to bachelor's and certification program for bilingual paraeducators at Highline Schools in Skagit Valley. She's also the co-director of the Master's in Education program with a language and literacy focus. Her scholarly work focuses on culturally and linguistically diverse students and the people who teach them. So great, well, we'll start out first with Alex.
Great, glad to be here with you today. Did you want me to just start with kind of some of the policy lens? Is that where you'd like me to start? Okay, great. So in our state, in Washington, we have been really interested and committed to grow your own for some time now. In many cases, we work with many of you, both in the state and around the country, trying to continue to advance this work. And it's great to see some familiar faces today. We have a variety of structures that kind of provide incentive grant support as well as policy. So I'm the executive director for the Professional Educator Standards Board, and we're very interested in both growing bilingual educators as well as developing more educators of color across the educator career continuum. One of the things that we are really utilize to do that is we have an alternative route block grant. We have preparation programs that are can be community colleges, they can be ESDs, regional service districts, they can be more traditional preparation programs, and they partner with districts or community organizations to really focus on developing educators in particular shortage areas. We talk about shortage both from a lens of geographic, subject matter, but also demographics. And when we think about who we really want to serve around the state and where are there gaps in terms of who is being developed. And I think one last thing I would add is we have a robust high school teacher academy program, the Recruiting Washington Teacher program. We also have a bilingual educator initiative, and we've really tried to weave some of our different kinds of grant funding to really grow more educators, tribal educators, more educators that have bilingual skills, and really building those transitional opportunities for some of our grant programs to connect and build partnerships in regions. Pass it back to the Ed Northwest folks, unless there's something specific you'd like me to share about that. You're going to hear from both one such partnership in Western and Highline, and so they're up next.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. And yeah, if there's any point you'd like to jump in and add any little bit of detail to the discussion that we're of the partnership we're about to hear, you're welcome to hop in. And now we're going to transfer over to Bernard and Marcia and hear from them about the successful partnership.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share about our partnership, our GYO partnership between one school district and one teacher preparation program. And for this opportunity to connect with others who are doing this work. I was so excited to be in the breakout group with so many Oregon State professors that I haven't met before. That's really exciting. For some of you, I see some familiar names here from Washington. This will be similar to, or a repeat to what Kristen Percy-Califf and I presented for the dual language OSPI meetings. But today you get Bernard's insights as from his higher district level and from the original co-writer of this grant with me. This is, again, next slide, a partnership between Highline Public Schools, and Highline is located in the SeaTac area. You probably have flown in or out of SeaTac. If you take SeaTac and you expand it about 20 miles every direction, you have Highline Public Schools and Western Washington University. And we are in our 6th year working on this K-8 alternative route. And it all started with an ARBG grant opportunity and Highline strategic plan and Western's commitment to bilingual education. Take it away, Bernard. Next slide.
All right, thank you, Marcia. So I think it's important to do some context setting to understand the conditions that made this program possible. And it really is about that alignment of policy from the state level to with an institution of higher education like Western and in a local school district. And that's a big part of understanding how we've been able to arrive at where we are today. So the one thing I always want to share with folks about this is Highline is a school district that's very much committed to graduating all our students bilingual and biliterate. And that's a pretty unique and audacious goal to not only, we have a lot of things about saying our commitment to equity and policies on that, and that's all good stuff and it's important. But actually by centering bilingualism in the center of the educational experience, that's a different kind of commitment. And it drives a lot of our interest in our need and the necessity to go out and hire teachers that reflect our community. So it's not just a commitment to go hire teachers that reflect our community. We've built a program that demands it, and you have to do that in order to make it happen. So just a brief bit about how Highline is doing that. We are not wall-to-wall dual language programs, but we are on a trajectory to have a full 1/3 of our kids enrolled in dual language programs. Currently, 6 of our 8 elementary schools are running dual language, primarily in Spanish. We do have 1 Vietnamese program. And we're committed to figuring out other language learning opportunities for kids with universal enrollment of all kids in middle school in world language programs. So that drives a lot of our need to do this. To get there, as the program grew, we had to hire a lot of teachers, and all my HR friends out there know, really even probably run the call knows, when you go to hire bilingual teachers, it is a fierce hiring market right now to try and get teachers with those language skills. So we've looked high and low, far and wide. We've hired teachers from Spain. We tried to figure out how to do an exchange program with Mexico. We go down and try to hire friends away from some of you in Oregon, try to get them to come up here further afield. And none of those strategies are super great. And there's problems with all those strategies of trying to go get other people from other places because they're not from here and they typically don't end up wanting to stay. Sometimes they do, and that's cool, that's awesome. But really, what drove us to need to do this program was this need to have teachers that are from here and want to be here and want to stay here. one of the other things to know about the program as we kind of start talking about it here is that it's alignment also with what the community wants and what the community needs and what they're supportive of, so that our families and our teachers understand why we're doing this program and why we're committed to it, as well as the labor unions that support our teachers as well as our paraprofessionals. So they're all part of this story. They're all part of this goal. Let's go and check out the next slide. So in terms of just a little bit about kind of the logistics of the program and kind of where we're at with the numbers, it is a 2-year bachelor's completion program. And in our first cohort, we had 16 folks and they all graduated. And that first cohort, I believe we started with 17 and 1 peeled off and took a little bit of a different direction, but that's the only person so far we've actually had not complete the program. Our second cohort that started in 2018, wrapped up in 2020, had 14 graduates. And as you can imagine, they had a bit of a switch up in the last 4 or 5 months of their program with the pandemic. And then we recruited and launched another cohort that just launched earlier this year, well, last summer. And recruitment was, as you can imagine, a little more challenging during that time. So we have 12 in that cohort. So the cohort nature is really something to highlight here, and we'll talk about that kind of throughout, is creating that collective experience is one of the key pieces of why I believe this program is responsive in supporting teachers from our community, is that collective approach rather than an individual approach of having to navigate a system in an educational experience on your own. And I think we have Marcia talking to us a little bit more about the structure of the program.
Yep. So next slide, please. So this is a picture of our first cohort in their second year. And I heard Oregon talking about the EdPPA. They're actually doing pictorial input charts that they did in one of their classes that they are then sharing with their mentor teachers. They all have a mentor teacher that they are paired with from the beginning of their first year in the program all the way through the second program year. And I said that Highline's about 100 miles from our main campus in Bellingham. And Highline is a much more diverse community than our community in Bellingham. So we're really excited to work, the college is really excited to work with Highline schools. There are more than 90 languages represented by the students in Highline Public Schools. Really exciting place. Next slide, please. So our kind of shared goals are that to increase that number of highly qualified bilingual teachers from the community, and at the same time to increase the number of teachers of color who reflect the student population. And as Conrad has already talked about, we know how important both of those pieces are. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about kind of the process, because for me, from the university side, this makes a huge difference. Paraeducators that are employed in the district or that are employed into the district all have to apply for a new position, which is a bilingual teaching fellow position at Highline. And one of the things that Bernard and I did when we first sat down and conceptualized this is, as he said, brought in the union, and we worked with the Teamsters Union, which is the Paraeducators Union, to develop a new job description. And so in this job description for teaching fellows, it's a little bit higher pay than a bilingual paraeducator. And it's clear in a teaching fellow job description that you are not a paraeducator, really. You are a teaching fellow. You can take on much more of the teaching. Will have much more responsibilities. And that helps for us to be able to lean back on if needed, for people to get experiences that they need. So if Highline interviews somebody and they say to me, Marcia, we're really interested in this person, then I start working with them, with my folks at the university, to see if they have the qualifications, the basic qualifications to get into the program. And we help them figure out if we can get them in time, or what they would need to do to get into our next cycle. Once we've done that and they've applied to Highline, then they apply for the program through Western Washington University, and they apply to the university. And the beauty for me as a college professor and reviewing applications is this district has already committed to these paraeducators, these fellows, these bilingual paraeducators. The district has already said, these are our bilingual teaching fellows that we want to support in any way possible in order to be our future dual language teachers. I've worked with other districts. This is the difference, is that the district owns the future teachers. Then the paraeducators, bilingual, work full-time, and they work as bilingual paraeducators. Something we learned from the first cohort, we didn't do this, and we have for the second and third, is that we need to specify what that kind of work is, because what happens often is people say, oh, paraeducator, sure, you can do whatever it takes to become a teacher. And they spend half their day in the supervision in the cafeteria, part of their day supervising bus lines, and some time working with small groups. So we make it really clear that half of the day, every day for 2 years is spent with the mentor teacher in that mentor classroom. And that is key. And within that time, they do all of the course experiences that they need to do. They have that opportunity to do that. And then when it gets into the internship, the goal is to have 2 bilingual fellows in a school so that they can cover each other during their full-time internship, which we have a 5-week full-time in the end of the second year for the fellows. And then they graduate with a bachelor's of education, with a K-8 teaching endorsement, usually with an ELL endorsement, and with a bilingual teaching endorsement. And then they hit the schools running. So out of those 39, out of the graduates we've had, all are teaching in Highline except one who has moved on to, well, didn't live in the area. Next slide, please. 3 minutes. Wow, that's not very much time. I already talked about that it's a full-time bilingual teacher fellow job with a separate job description, full-time Western students working toward a BA in certification. They take classes in the evenings, Saturdays, and in the summer. It is an intense program. We schedule the courses around their work time. Because we're working with one district, we focus it on Highline curriculum and equity goals, and they match ours at the university. The quality and rigor is equal to or greater than that on campus, and that's a really important piece, that the campus needs to feel comfortable. This is not a lesser than program or a pay your fee, get your degree program. This is an intense, rigorous, meets the expectations of the university. And then we have monthly mentor meetings that are co-facilitated by a district teacher on special assignment and a university field supervisor. And those two work as partners from day one of the program, getting to know the fellows from their very first day, which was summer of last year. And they work with them all through the next 2 years. And we have a whole team. So if somebody needs support, all somebody has to do is contact one of us, and we put everybody into action to do whatever we need to support a bilingual fellow to continue, be it extra tutoring, just social emotional support, financial support, computers, whatever it is that they need. Bernard, we should switch up to you even. Go ahead, next slide.
Okay.
Well,
so
go ahead.
Yeah, so just in terms of how the money kind of flows on this, so right now with the alternative route block grant, our candidates all get an $8,000 a year forgivable loan scholarship, which helps out a ton. It's great for recruiting purposes to be able to promise that, even though there are some other opportunities for that support out there. Our contract with Teamsters provides some additional funding that can kind of close some of those gaps sometimes. And one thing just to highlight for district folks and HR folks, that half-day assignment that Marcia was talking about, we invest in that. It works out for about half of the folks because we can assign them to kindergarten classrooms, and the full-day K program requires a half-day para, so those work out beautifully, but they're not all there. So we have to prioritize some of our state transitional bilingual funds, or that's our ELL money for our Oregon friends. And we do some strategic staffing of placing those folks in classrooms where they can provide that ELL support, so it makes sense with the grant source for why they're there. But also we got to jockey that money around to make that make sense sometimes. In both the university and the school district, we were wrapped around this. Our HR team at the district spends a lot of time on this. I spend time on this. Our administrators spend time, likewise on the university. There's a lift, and it's not all funded by a special position all the time. With the next slide. And so with that, there is one way to think about this is like, imagine if you're a school district person, like imagine that like you have a university that's like down the hall and part of your team. Like that's what when this is working really well, that's what this feels like. We're on the phone back and forth with this university field supervisor, back and forth on the placement piece, and we work really, really closely together. We know each other and we work together, and we're going to wrap up as soon as possible. We're going to hit the next slide. So at the school district, we do have one person that's dedicated that spends about half the time on this. They're also a peer mentor for new teachers. And with the next slide, what do we got? So just, yeah, emphasizing that it's a really strong partnership, and that's part of what makes this work, is there's investment in that relationship, and we're collectively responsible for our work. So I think that just about closes us out. Let's check out the last slide, see if I forgot anything. Yeah, outcomes, we've talked about this. They're doing great. So I think that wraps us up with rapid fire at the end there.
I should also say that out of those 29 graduates, out of our first cohort, the beginning teacher of the year this year was one of our graduates from the first cohort. 2 of the graduates from the first cohort are now doing a master's degree with me in language and literacy, and partially supporting the 3rd group of fellows as graduate assistants. Another thing that we do that is really important is the affinity groups, where the fellows themselves have put together Get Real sessions where they meet on a quarterly basis. And it's only fellows, no university administrators, no school district administrators, so that they can get real and talk about what it's like to be a teacher of color in a school, what it's like to be a teacher, sometimes the only bilingual, sometimes the only teacher of color in a school, what it's like to be bilingual in the school, etc. And that's it.
Thank you so much. This is a really exciting partnership, and sorry to rush you on it. I'm sure that you guys could talk all day about the amazing work that's happening in the district and with your university. And so thank you so much for providing that information. We're going to hop quickly to the breakout rooms now. We're going to have about 10 minutes to kind of talk over what we've heard and share any ideas. And again, you'll be going back to the same breakout rooms, so you can hit the ground running on your discussion. And I believe that Jenny will provide some questions in case you need those in your breakout room. And great, thank you guys. And we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you all. We are just about at time. I wanted to sort of, I heard some amazing comments. There's been some really interesting, I heard some really interesting conversation, and great presentations. So again, I am very excited to host today's event. It was originally, as many of you may know, originally planned to be an in-person day-long event, and that was it was supposed to happen a year ago. Obviously it didn't, and someday we hope to be able to host an in-person event for all of us, so that we can actually spend the day networking in a way that Zoom just does not allow. But again, thank you very much. In the next few days, you're going to receive a link to a webpage, which will be hosted on the REL Northwest website, which will eventually hold a recording of the keynote and partnership sessions, as well as links to materials produced by Education Northwest. I have one favor to ask all of you, and it's the favor that I absolutely hate to ask, which is I'm going to send out a survey link. I just pasted it in the text. Please take a moment and fill out that survey today. It is, unfortunately, our funder, the Department of Education, requires a survey, requires that we do this to collect feedback. And so please take a moment, fill out the survey. It should only take you a couple minutes. It's basically multiple choice. Here's the link again. And that's it. We look forward. Please reach out to me or any of the presenters. And yes, hooray for surveys. And I really am grateful for your time and your attendance. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.
Yep, thank you.